Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm your host, Dorothy Jordan of AARP with AARP Alabama. And I want to thank last week's host, Ann Hales, for a great job on the Wisdom Wednesday she did with Mayor Reed. That was really great and really informative. And it was wonderful for me because I was on vacation at Oak Mountain State Park with my family. So thanks again, Ann, for that. That was great. So as the holiday season quickly approaches, many of us are baking treats and goodies, and if you're like me, baking sugar cookies and decorating them is a great mystery, and I am not very talented at that at all. I can never seem to get the dough from spreading in the oven or getting the icing at the right consistency. And a little anecdote, which is kind of funny, is on Facebook this morning, it popped up a memory from December 9th, 2018. And it was actually when I baked cookies with my family, and that's my son and my husband there. And we did everything store-bought. So that's store-bought icing, store-bought dough. As you can tell, we tried our best, but our guest today is going to show us how to do some that look more like this and do them from scratch, which I'm really excited about. And she is a super talented baker, and Lorie Bennett has turned basically her hobby into a business. She's a retired school teacher, and she's just over the past year, she's mastered the art of cookie baking and decorating. And so she is going to share some tips with us today and some of her recipes today. So I want to welcome Lorie. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. I'm excited. And as always, folks, please feel free to ask your questions, your relevant questions in the comments, and we will try to get to those during the show and at the end of the show as well. And also, as always, we'll be posting the slides and the pictures and everything you'll be seeing today in the comments on the Facebook broadcast of this. So you'll be able to go back and look at those, as well as go back and look at this video and share it and all that stuff indefinitely on Facebook and on YouTube. So Lorie, we are going to get started. And right. So, you know, how did you get started with this? Because this is something that I would love to do as a hobby, but I just find I just don't have the talent for it. So tell us a little bit about how you came about making this into a business and just creating these beautiful cookies.
Okay, well, thank you. And I disagree. You can do this. I promise you can. Well, it all started about a year ago. My daughter, who lives across the country, sent me a cookie video, and I found it oddly satisfying to watch over and over and over again. So then for my birthday, my partner got me some cookie decorating stuff, which is my birthday's in a few days. So I just like I want to make these. I want to make these. And I just got addicted to doing it. It became an obsession. And I would bring them to school to my friends and to get-togethers. And then people I worked with started asking me, hey, would you do some for my daughter's birthday party? Or I'm like, really? Oh, well, sure. That'd be awesome. So through that, and pay me. So, and through that, it just kind of evolved. I had a lot of encouragement from my partner. He's like, you can do this. This could be a business for you. And so, like I said, I started out just doing birthday parties here and there, and just the word spread. And as I did every order I did, or I practiced at home, I got a little bit more confident in it and watched a lot of tutorials and things like that. And when the pandemic hit, I really had a lot of extra time. So that's when I kind of started getting my website designed by
Yeah.
my partner, who's a web designer. And like I said, I couldn't have done it without all that support. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it just kind of evolved in that way. So one good thing about the pandemic, I guess, for
Yeah, no,
me.
that is true. That is true. To have a good hobby like that already
Yeah,
established. That was
yeah,
great. That was
yeah.
wonderful. And before it gets away from me, happy early birthday. I did not
Thank
know that.
you. Thank
So
you.
great. So that's a great story, Lorie. And so if we're starting out as amateurs, what are some of our basic tools that we need? Can you talk a little bit about what our must-haves are, and then maybe what our good to haves are?
Sure, sure, sure. Okay, well, you're going to need some kind of mixer. Um, I'm lucky enough to have a stand mixer, but I got it used, and it's a lifesaver. But you can definitely do it with a hand mixer. You're just going to have to be right on top of it the whole time. Just your basic measuring cups and spoons, a spatula for kind of scraping and stirring icing, a rolling pin, or like a bottle, like a wine bottle maybe that you could roll with, or like a heavy glass that's very
Mhm.
cylindrical if you didn't have a rolling pin.
I have
The
plenty
next,
of wine bottles, so that'll work.
exactly, don't we all right now? A scribe is a tool that is really just a like a almost like a sharp needle-like tool. But when I first started, I didn't have one. I used toothpicks, or actually what I preferred using were like skewers, like wooden skewers. And that's for popping air bubbles in your icing once you've flooded a cookie, or moving icing around. So I like to use a scribe, but you can definitely use something that you may already have at home, like a toothpick or something like that. And then the next thing on the list are just some airtight containers for mixing and storing your icing, because a lot of times you're going to use more than one color. You'll make it all white at the beginning, but then you'll need to separate it so you can add your colors. And I like to use just like little like the snapware, but I know a lot
Mhm.
of people collect the margarine tubs, or anything like that that either has a lid, or you can cover it with maybe some saran wrap to keep it airtight, because you don't want your icing to crust over. And then the last thing on the list are icing bags. And these are, you've probably seen like in a bakery where they pipe the icing, buttercream icing on a cake, and they might be reusable. These are just like little plastic bags with a point to it, and you can just cut the tip off. And I know before I had very many, I would even attempt to, or I just needed a little bit of icing color, I might put some in a Ziploc bag and kind of push it down and cut the end. It doesn't work quite as well, but it can work.
Okay,
So
great. That is some great stuff to know. And are there some things that aren't necessarily must-haves, but are just kind of like some good to haves if you can get them?
oh gosh. And something else I didn't say, a cookie cutter. And I
Yeah.
forgot
Oh,
to tell
yeah.
you to add that to the list. I mean, you can cut your own shapes, but it's a little tedious. So
Yeah. No, I would
yeah.
definitely say cookie cutter. So.
Yeah, yeah. Now, other things that you can use that you don't necessarily have to have, you can use tips to put in your bag, or
Mhm.
like to make different shapes. Like if you're going to use a stiff icing and you want to make a star shape, or you want to learn how to make a petal, you can
Mhm.
cut your bags that way.
Mhm.
Or you can use a tip and you can pop it in the bag. You cut the hole a little bit bigger. And there's another thing that I love to use. It's called a coupler. And
Okay.
that's something where you don't have to, like, say you only have one of this certain kind of tip, and you
Mhm.
need to change colors with it. The coupler will let you take it off the bag and put it on a new bag. So
Okay.
you don't have to have six of one type of tip, maybe.
Okay.
So
So it's almost
yeah.
like a little washer that's kind of lets them
Yeah,
screw
it's like a
on. Okay.
two-piece little thing. And something else, it's not necessary, but I find it helpful, is some type of fan. I bought a little fan, just a little fan. And
Mhm.
when you flood your cookies, you can just let it blow over the top of your cookies.
Okay.
And it
Yeah.
kind of helps them crust over quickly. and it gives them a nice little sheen when they're
Okay.
finished, but not a
Nice.
necessity. So
Nice. Great. And as far
yeah.
as like maybe like cooking spray or parchment paper,
Oh
or
yeah.
is that
So
something?
so to bake, I started using parchment paper,
Okay.
and that's great. It's perfect, and you can
Okay.
even use it to roll your dough out on with a little flour. You can
Mhm.
put another piece on top and roll it out, and then you
Mhm.
don't get your rolling pin all gooey. Or I've kind of graduated to purchasing a few silicone mats at a time, and
Okay.
so
Yeah.
I love those because I can roll on them and I can bake on them,
Okay.
and it gives the bottoms a nice kind of flat finish. But I would definitely at least invest in some parchment paper.
Yes.
That's pretty important.
Okay.
It'll make
Great.
your life easier, no sticking and things like
Yes.
that. So
I use it just because I'm lazy and don't necessarily
yeah,
want to really clean the pan as much, or the
yeah,
cookie sheet
that
as
too.
much.
Or
Well,
in
great.
between batches too, you don't get all the greasy,
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right. That's
yeah,
perfect. Oh,
yeah.
great. That's good to know. Good stuff to know. So, okay, we've got our basic tools. We're ready to start with our cookie recipe. So, I'm going to
Okay.
pop your cookie recipe up here real quick if I can find it. There we go. And if you want to just maybe talk us through
Sure.
it, and just if there's any extra tips you want to add, or just things to know about it as we go through it. So,
Okay. Well, this is a really basic sugar cookie recipe. I did not design this. I found it on the internet, interwebs. So don't be afraid to Google and look for recipes. I shared this one because it's pretty simple. Um, I I started out with this recipe, and now I still use this one a lot of times, and it gets rave reviews. People love the flavor of this cookie. I will say, when you're looking at the ingredients, the butter, it says softened. I learned the
mhm,
hard way. Softened does not mean soft. It it means room temperature, and to me, room temperature sounds a little bit softer than really you should go. What I usually do is I take my sticks of butter out, and if it's just a nice normal day, I'll leave them on the counter, and I'll set my timer for an hour, 45 minutes, and I'll wait about that long. I don't melt it. I don't heat it up in the microwave. That has not worked for me. Um, and then if you just kind of press your index finger on it and it gives a little bit, it's probably good to go. And then I started out just throwing the sticks in the blender. Now I just kind of chop them up in like tablespoons. Not accurate, not super accurate, but just get
right.
them a little bit smaller. Eggs, I will say I would use large eggs,
Okay.
or jumbo eggs. That seems to work. You need a little more egg than like a medium egg. Your flavoring, you can use any flavor you like. My favorite is lemon, but a lot of kids love vanilla. Vanilla's delicious too. I know a lot of bakers bake with almond, and that seems to be a big hit.
That's
But you
my
can
favorite.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, almond. Okay, I haven't ventured there yet, but I think a lot of people like that. But it's just your extracts,
Mhm.
your lemon extract, your vanilla extract. There's a lot of different things available in the grocery store. You can look online for a little more special
Right.
flavors. Flour, all purpose flour. I don't know if I put that on there, not self rising, all purpose flour.
All
And
purpose.
it says 2 3/4 cups. Sometimes you'll need a little more. It's a weird, wonky thing. You have to, um, if you don't use enough flour, your cookies could spread. If you use too much, they might be kind of not as tasty. So a good tip that I've learned from some friends I've met in the baking world is watch your mixer to see when your dough starts to pull away from the bowl onto your actual paddle, or your the parts that, if you had a hand mixer, that part. And
Mhm.
then I like to touch mine and see. And if it feels real sticky, then
Mhm.
it probably needs a little more flour. Now,
Okay.
saying that, you have to do it on low, mix on low, I always use the lowest setting. And then also, because you don't want to over mix it, because then that's going to make for a tough cookie. But you do have to, that's why I like to start real slow and low, and then add a little bit of flour at a time. And then once I get to the 2 3/4 cups, it doesn't feel, if it still feels too sticky to me, or it's really sticking to the sides of the bowl, then I may add like a 1/4 or an 1/8 of a cup at a time. Just toss it in there. Don't be afraid to do it. It'll, you'll kind of get to that point. The more you do it, the more you'll kind of gauge. And then the time of year affects that as well. So,
Right, yeah.
it's winter, you may need a little more flour. Summer, you might not. And then the last step, while you're getting that on the screen, is to wrap your dough. And a lot of times people would think you need it in a ball. It's actually better if you kind of flatten it out, because when you start to roll, it'll be a little easier to roll. Wrap it in some plastic wrap. This says chill for at least 2 hours. A lot of times I will chill mine overnight. And if you're not going to use it, you can make it for like 3 days ahead. And if you're not going to use it in 3 days, you can put it in a freezer bag and pop it in the freezer. And you take it out, put it on the counter, and let it thaw out. And it's just like the day you made it. So
that's great. And that's so smart to do it in a brick. Like, that just makes total sense. But you're just kind of programmed to do that ball, to roll it out. So so that's great to know. So okay, so we've made our dough, and so now we've got some tips on, or I should say, you've got some tips on rolling it and cutting it out. So I'm going to pop these up here, and then we'll go from there. So
okay, so I already talked about number 6. Number 7, lightly, because you don't want to add a whole lot of flour at this point, just enough to keep it from sticking to either whatever you're rolling out on. If you're rolling on a clean countertop, you're probably definitely going to need some flour, and just kind of move it around with your hand. And then, or if you're going to use a silicone mat, which that's what I like to use, that kind of makes it a little easier to make for cleanup and stuff. And then you can lightly dust your rolling pin, or you can use another piece of parchment on top of your dough. Just kind of lightly put a little extra flour on top of the dough, and then lay a piece of parchment on it, or another silicone mat, and then use your rolling pin or your bottle, whatever you're using, on top of that. That keeps your it keeps the dough from sticking to your rolling pin, and it keeps your rolling pin from having to be washed in between batches.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Again, I've learned this from so many people. I've made so many friends in this cookie world. So then at number 8 says to roll your dough about a 1/4 inch thick. When I first started, I had no idea how to find a 1/4 inch. So I took a wooden skewer and I marked a 1/4 inch on it, and I would just pop it in there. And it was hard to get it nice and level. So now what I do is I went to a store, and I bought a rectangular dowel rod for like $1, and we cut it into pieces. And so now I lay it on either side of my dough, and then I cover my dough, and I roll it. And so when my rolling pin hits those 2 dowels, I know I'm at a 1/4 inch.
Oh,
And
that's a great idea.
And my piece, and my whole brick of dough is pretty much level. But you don't have to do that. You can eyeball it, and the worst thing that can happen is you'll have a little bit thicker cookie, or a little cookie that might not be exactly flat, but that's okay too. And then after you cut your shapes, you can kind of lift your parchment a little bit, and just kind of carefully just make sure that they're not going to they're not sticking, or your silicone mat. And then you can move those over to whatever your baking surface is going to be, whether it's parchment on a cookie sheet or your silicone mat on a cookie sheet. And then what I like to do at this point is to pop them either in the freezer for a few minutes, or pop them in the refrigerator. I personally like the freezer, but it just
Okay.
depends on how my dough is acting that day.
Mhm.
If I can get away with just putting them in the refrigerator for 10 minutes
Mhm.
while my oven heats up, it just
Mhm.
helps them hold together. And
Okay.
then when you pop them in the oven, the edges will hopefully stay straight, and that hopefully will help you with the spreading issue, which
Okay.
can happen to anyone. Even people that bake cookies all day long sometimes have an issue. So don't
Okay.
give up if that
Yes.
happens.
And I wanna point out these great pictures that you took. Here are your dowel rods that you use. Is that correct? Those
Well,
red?
these are fancy dowel rods. I was at my
Okay.
daughter's house, and she has this amazing silicone mat that's very huge because they bake a lot of bread and stuff. And
Mhm.
these are 1/4 inch rods that are plastic that came with
Okay.
this silicone mat. And
Cool.
I'm hoping Santa Claus brings that to me this year. But mine are just basic little wood, not fancy at all.
Yeah.
Pieces of wood and
Okay.
dowel rod, but the same. That this is the
Same
same
concept.
principle. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
great, awesome. Okay,
yeah.
and so we pop them into the freezer or the fridge. You prefer the freezer, but the fridge will do
The
too. And
fridge will
then
do. Yeah.
okay, and then we preheat.
Preheat 350, 375. This is kind of where you have to know your oven. I
Mhm.
had to, all ovens are so weird. So I actually bought a oven thermometer. And so then I know that maybe on my oven, 375 is, 400,
Yeah.
and I'm going to burn my cookies. So if you know your oven, I would maybe do a test and just realize, just kind of keep an eye on it. And then sometimes if you're having a spread problem,
Mhm.
it is better to go up a little bit, and maybe to put it on 375 at the beginning to kind of help the cookie set, and then watch it, either bake it a couple minutes less, or you can bump it back down to 350. Again, that's one of those nuanced things you just have to learn with your
Mhm.
oven. And
Yep.
then when it says bake cookies for 11 to 13 minutes, that certainly depends on the size of your cookie.
Mhm.
So, and always bake like sized cookies together. So I wouldn't
Mhm.
bake a 5-inch Christmas tree with a
Mhm.
2-inch candy cane, because your 2-inch candy cane is going to be burnt, or your
Right.
or your your Christmas tree is going to be raw. So just kind of watch the edges. You can
Mhm.
barely see a little light brown on the edges. If you like them a little bit softer, you can
Mhm.
pull them on out right before that. But again, something I didn't tell you to put on the slide that I've kind of learned is,
Mhm.
if you watch the top of the cookie also, if it looks shiny or wet, it's not ready. The top of the cookie. So you can look at the edges, but also look at the top of your cookie. And when it
Okay.
looks dry, that means you're getting there.
That's great. I am actually putting these in the comments as we talk.
Oh,
So your
good.
extra
Yay.
tips and stuff, so they're there. So that's really good to know. And we had a really good question from Ann Hales. I'm gonna pop it up there real quick. And she asks, let me take this down so we can see. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
That's sorry,
I
that
can
was
see.
my sticky thumb. If the cookies if the cookies spread on the first pan full of cookies and you still have dough left, can you go back and put more flour in, or will this make the dough too tough?
That is a really good question. Hi, Anne. Um, I I'm going to say I've never tried that.
Hmm.
Um, I would say maybe if they spread, it may be that either the butter, when you may have overbeat, or the butter was too soft when you went in, or what I would do in this situation, instead of trying to add flour to dough that's already chilled and all that jazz, I would probably say I'm going to really chill my dough super, super well, get it nice and cold before I roll it out, cut my
Hmm.
shapes. Sometimes I'll do this and sometimes it's hard to get it to roll out. I'll get it that firm.
Okay.
Cut them, and then maybe try popping them in the freezer. And also, you can try putting them on a room temperature pan when you pop them in the oven. I don't know that would work. That's something I will, maybe I'll try it, but everything that I've read says you really can't go back and fix it at that point, the dough. So
it seems like
usually
there's
what
a
I
lot
do,
of factors a lot of factors can play into it. So it's not just
and
the
sometimes
flour.
it's like a big science experiment where you're
Right.
like, what was it this? I used to think it was my brand of flour. No,
Mhm.
no, I think a lot of times maybe bump up your temperature on your oven.
Mhm.
And when I get a lot of cookies that spread, they're still delicious.
Yep.
And a lot of times I'll either give them to my little kids in my neighborhood with a bag of
Mhm.
icing and let them just have fun with them. So, it's like I said,
Yeah.
it's just kind of a work in progress.
I think that's the greatest point to make in this whole show is to have fun with it. I know that
Yes.
in some of my ventures in making my own dough and having it spread, I have come out with some of the fattest little gingerbread men, and my candy canes look like just a big blob. And there's, like you said, they're still good. My 4-year-old and 2-year-old
Love
don't
them.
care.
No.
And that's and added a comment. They will still taste good even if they spread.
Yes.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. And so I think that is the key point in all of this. And there was an earlier comment that I think is perfect right now because I have this problem too. Candy Williams says I have to stop eating the cookies long enough to decorate them. Just saying.
I'm bad about eating the dough too, and I
Oh,
know I
yes.
shouldn't do that, but
I know,
it's
with the
so
raw
good.
egg and
That's taste
everything, but
testing, yeah.
yes.
Well, you
Yes,
have
I
to
get
make
it.
sure they're good enough for your family.
Right,
So,
absolutely. I mean, you
and
have to definitely taste test those cookies before you start
absolutely.
all that work on icing them. So
Exactly. Yeah.
all right, well, that's great. And so now we've got, again, I'm going to show this picture of how cool they are rolled out and everything. And I like the magic trick of throwing them in the freezer because I actually did not know that. So I'm going to try that next time I try
Good.
it.
Yeah.
And let's see. And now we're getting ready. And another Anne is just on fire with these great questions. What is a flavor do most of your customers prefer? You said you like lemon the best. Is there a particular flavor that you use the most for other folks?
Yeah, I would say probably vanilla.
Mhm.
Most people, I think, because they're not sure,
Mhm.
but I would, if you're doing it for yourself, I would think, maybe this batch I'll do, or, you could even, do this flavor one time and this flavor
Mhm.
another time. I've tried chocolate. I found a really good chocolate sugar cookie recipe. It's different though. I
Yeah.
found
Yeah.
most kids are not crazy for the lemon. I don't know if it's
Okay.
our old taste buds or what,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
love the lemon. That's
Yeah.
my favorite.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those
Okay.
are the only flavors I have offered for sale are vanilla and
Mhm.
lemon. Have not even
Okay.
offered the chocolate yet.
Mhm.
But like we were talking earlier, a lot of people
Mhm.
like the almond. I know a lot of
Yeah.
bakers use the almond.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
So.
may venture that there this year. So
And I know that there's some of that flavor extracts out there, like typical vanilla you find is a very dark brown,
yeah.
and but there's also clear versions of it too.
Hmm.
Is there one you recommend over the other as far as looking at the color or
I,
you know?
I use pure vanilla. A lot
Okay.
of the clear ones are like an imitation.
Hmm.
Certainly not anything wrong with that. I just feel like as someone who's selling
Hmm.
cookies, I'm trying to be transparent and say
Hmm.
there's really vanilla in here. So
Right.
I kind
Right.
of I do go I go the higher cost on that, but you could
Hmm.
certainly use uh,
The
any
imitation.
any I
Okay.
think would be fine. Yeah.
Okay, great, awesome. All right, so we've eaten a couple of cookies before we've decorated them,
Getting
and
hungry.
so now we are ready to do our decorating and our icing. So here's our icing recipe, or here's your icing recipe, I should say, that you've so generously shared with us. And could you just kind of talk through this and see if there's any pointers or tips you have for this?
Sure.
Great.
Also, I'm not going to take credit for creating this recipe. Again, the World Wide Web is a beautiful place, and you can find just about anything you need on there. This is a real basic royal icing recipe that I started with a year ago, and I still use because I find it so easy, and it almost always works out for me. So I will say a pound of sugar. You can buy a box that's already a pound. I would 4 cups, but I actually do measure my weight. And I do that on my flour as well, just because it's such a light, airy, substance. But they certainly make it super easy for you when you buy powdered sugar. And then, but if you can't weigh it and you just have a huge bag, then go with 4 cups. It's going to be pretty close. And this isn't as scary as getting the flour wrong on the dough, because you can thicken this up or thin it out if you need to down at the end of the road. So you'll need a little bit of warm water here, a third a cup. And then what I use in several tablespoons for different consistencies, I use a spray bottle. I just bought a little $1 spray bottle. And that way I can add a little bit of water at a time, because sometimes you'll get right where you need to be and you might just use a tablespoon too much, and then you're like, oh darn, I got too thin. So a spray bottle is good, or a dropper, or if you're going to use a spoon, just a little bit at a time. A quarter cup of meringue powder. Now, I know when I first started, I was like, what the heck? I don't even know where to find this stuff. I found some in a store. I now order mine off the internet, but you can find it in maybe the party section of a big box store, like where the cake pans and the decorations and things like that are. And then your flavoring. I use either vanilla or lemon, just depending on who I'm making the cookies for. A lot of my people that love lemon cookies, they want full lemon on lemon. So I do both. But that is it on the ingredients. And then you've got your steps down here. Make sure your water's kind of warm, because that helps dissolve the meringue powder. You can do that part by hand, just kind of whisk it, or you can just put it in your mixer. I've done it both ways and it works fine. And then when you're mixing it, once it's fluffy and foamy, kind of scrape the sides down. If you have any little clumps of meringue powder, you want to kind of break those up. Add your flavor, mix that up, and then you can do this a couple of different ways. On the recipe, it says mix the powder and sugar so you don't have like a snowball bomb in your face.
Right.
So you can do that, like just scoop in a cup at a time in your mixer. Or I found this out. I watched some girl on the internet. She puts all hers in at once and stirs it a little bit to get it kind of going. And then she turns her mixer on. Both ways have worked, but I would maybe start with the one, to gain your confidence, maybe start with one cup at a time. Then once it's all blended, you're going to have to put it a little bit higher to like your low medium. If you're on my mixer, it's a number 4. That's what I use. And then I set my timer. I do 5 minutes. And that just allows, it'll go from ivory to more white. And it'll get stiff. And it depends. Now, if you're using a hand mixer, it may take longer. So I don't know, because I've never done this with a hand mixer. I love having a stand mixer for this part, because you can be doing other things while that's mixing. Now, I will say on this part, I have learned through the times that if you're going to color your icing after this, if you'll put in a little white food coloring at this point, after it's almost through mixing, just squirt you some, maybe, I don't know, a teaspoon of white food coloring. It brightens it. And it also, if you're going to make darker colors with some of your icing, it actually makes it hold that color a little bit better, so it doesn't get blotchy. If that makes sense.
Hold the other colors better. I am, for those of you who are watching right now, I am adding these little tips that aren't necessarily on here into the comment section of both the YouTube and the Facebook page. So you do have these written out in case you want to go back and look at them, because that's a great tip to know. And so Ann Hales, and I agree with her. She says she is a pro at making snowball bombs, and I am too. Whether it be with flour or powdered sugar, it somehow tends to get everywhere. So those are always fun. So
Oh
okay,
yeah.
great. So
Oh, that's funny.
we are at our point where I think we're about to color and talk about consistency. So here's all of this good stuff to know.
Okay, so icing consistency. This is where you get to decide how you want to do yours. Now, if you're for the photos that Dorothy shared, I did use. Okay, let me back up. So
Sure.
on this list here, I've got that you would make two consistencies. One to kind of outline your cookie, which is a
Mhm.
thicker consistency, and then one
Mhm.
to flood the inside of your cookie, which is obviously thinner. Um, I now use almost always one consistency, which is kind of in the middle of these two. But this is how I started. So this is why I shared. These directions. But if you decide you don't want to fool with having two icing consistencies, you can aim for about a 20 to 25-second icing. And what that means is, you see number 6 says run a
Mhm.
knife or a spatula across the icing and just
Mhm.
count and see how long it takes for it to settle back in on itself. So if you're doing one consistency, about a 20 to 25-second uh,
Okay.
is a good we call it hybrid. You may see, if you Google icing's consistency, sometimes people call it a hybrid consistency. If you just don't care and you want to do like thicker lines, you're not worried about flooding a cookie, then you can certainly make it stiffer, and you can do lines and things and add some sprinkles to it, and they'll still taste delicious. Um, and you're not sitting there worried about a flat, shiny, smooth surface. Because again, if you're doing
Mhm.
this with your children or grandchildren, it's really more about the experience and the
Exactly.
memory making. It's not about the perfect looking cookie, because the perfect looking cookie is the one that you have fun making with your family. So, all right. So once you have ended up mixing, and it should be forming either some stiff or some soft peaks. They can fold over a little bit, but it should be
Mhm.
peaking. That's when you're ready to separate it into colors. So if you know you want to use red and green and white, then you're going to need, depending on if you're going to do two consistencies or one, you're either going to need 3 containers or 6 containers, right? So
Mhm.
if you are going to do both the flood and the piping consistency, you won't need a whole lot for the piping. That's number 4. It says remove a small portion for each color that you're going to use for piping. But what I would say, and let me back up a little bit, I would actually mix, say, if I wanted to have a cup and a half of red icing, and I wanted to do piping and flooding, I would take all of that I'm going to use for red, color it red, and then scoop out some for my piping, and then use the remainder, add water to it to make it a flood consistency. That way your reds match,
Mhm.
right? And let me see. And then let me say this, red sometimes takes a long time. So don't get, for the first time I made red, which was the first time I made cookies, I used a whole little mini pot of red, which
Mhm.
doesn't taste good when you use that much of it. And I
Oh.
used a whole tub of it in my red, because I was like, it's just pink, it's just pink, it's just pink. Well, what happens is it takes time for a deep, dark, rich color to develop, like a black or a dark red, a dark blue. So don't be crazy about getting the perfect red, especially if it's your first time. Add some red, stir it up, give it a little time, wait a while, add some more. And a lot of times if you're using a gel, it's good to wait till overnight. You know, it's just one of those things that, sorry, my dog is crying.
That's okay.
It just takes some time. So lighter colors take less time, and darker, deeper colors take more time to develop in the bowl. So you want to cover once you've mixed it. You can take your, if you're doing the piping consistency, you can either go ahead and pop that in a bag, or you can cover that bowl while you are getting your flood consistency done. This is where your little spray bottle comes in handy. You can just spray a little bit and stir with your spatula, and then, or you can use a spoon. Just do a little bit at a time, and just kind of see how it runs. You know, if it floods out, using the seconds is a good way.
Okay. So say we've gotten a flood consistency that's probably a little too drippy. Is there a way to kind of stiffen it back up?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as it's not super, super runny. Yeah. Like, well, I've done it. I mean, some people say no, but I've taken just a little extra confectioner sugar and add it, but just do a little bit at a time and just kind of make sure you smooth it out. You don't want any big lumps of it in there. But yeah, you can. I would just do a little bit at a time, because then you don't want to get it too stiff. That's why it's so good if you can just be real. Sometimes it's tedious and you almost say, oh God, I just want to dump a quarter cup of water in here. I know it needs it. It's better just a little bit at a time. But you can you can certainly fix it. That's what we were talking about at the beginning of that recipe. Right. You know, maybe it wasn't exactly a pound. That's okay. Again, it depends on a lot of other factors, humidity, things like that. So
right. So, okay, well, that's great. So I'm going to pop up some pictures of decorating right now, because this is fun. And these are pictures of a candy cane. And are you using two different consistencies here, or one consistency?
No, I'd use just one consistency on this. But if you were using two, you would pipe a line, like in the first picture. You would just pipe a line around the shape, and don't freak out if it takes a little while to get the pressure right. You see, I'm kind of holding that bag with my other hand, my fingers. That kind of keeps me straight, but it takes a little practice to get your nice smooth line. Don't worry if it's bumpy. It'll be okay. You can always go back with your scribe or your toothpick and kind of wiggle that into place. But it does take a little practice, and you might want to practice on some parchment paper first. And that's, I always do a line before I get going anyway. So this is what we call the hybrid. So it's a little thicker, and I like the way the edge looks. But sometimes if it's too thin, it will roll right off, which I'll show you. We'll look at in a minute if we have time. And then fill in the cookie, starting at the edges, moving in. And then the fourth picture, you see me give it like just a little wiggle, just to kind of wiggle it out. And then if I have any little air bubbles, I take my scribe or my toothpick and I just pop them. And that's one of the most fun things to do, to be honest with you. And then this is called a wet on wet technique. And the reason I did this one is because once you're done, you're done. Then I took some white icing while that red was wet, and I just did the little white sections on top of it. And then I ran a little, almost like a reflecting line across the top. And then I was done with this cookie. So that's why I decided to share this one, because it was super simple. It's two colors, and you're done with the cookie once it's dry.
Yeah, that looks great. And then we have some other techniques on these pictures.
Right. So this icing was a little too thick, and I wanted to share this because, as we talked about before, Dorothy, some people might not want to fool with a piping bag. This is a fun thing. Kids like to do this. You can dip your cookie. I wasn't at my home, so I didn't have a very big bowl, but you could use like a shallow bowl, something that the actual cookie would fit in. I put some white icing, and then I just did some drizzly lines of red, and then I flipped my cookie and I just dipped it in that, and it kind of gave it a marble look. Not as much definition as the other candy cane, but still candy cane-ish, and kids like to do that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a tie-dye effect. And then
Yeah.
the bottom cookie, I just piped and flooded a single consistency, but you can use the two. And then still wet on wet. I just thought it would be fun to show you how you can, it looks super fancy and it is so super easy. Do you some lines and then drag your toothpick or your scribe through the icing, and you can do it both directions, and it makes a really cool design. You can make hearts with this too. I didn't show one of those, but it's an easy, quick cookie, and you've got your Christmas colors in on that, or whatever colors you decide to do. So that's another fun technique to use.
This is so great. And I'm going to pop up some of your final results. And these look like they are pretty much the same kind of wet on wet with maybe some sprinkles added. Is that correct?
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. The pajama bottoms are wet on wet. And then I went back and added some details, and I used a little thicker for their little fluffy slippers. I just tried some different like dots and things, added some little sugar crystals on the top, so just to make it fun. The Christmas tree, I just did it in sections, so it kind of gives it that dimension, but it's super easy. And I think that cookie was actually unfinished on the candy cane plate. You could see, I just did two sections. I let them crust over pretty good. They didn't have to be completely dry. Then add the other two sections, and then you can either add some sprinkles while they're still wet, or you can actually, like the little stars, I believe I had to go back because those were already dry. I added just a little thick icing on the bottom of the star and just added those. But the sprinkles I just threw in while after it had set for about a minute or so. And then the little package, same thing, it's just a wet on wet, nothing, I just added the white at the top and then did the bow on the top of it while it was wet. So that's why I think wet on wet is a great beginning technique, where you're not having to worry about, and plus then you don't have to wait as long. Like the pajama pants, I piped an extra little tie on the top, but that was dry before I did that. So just trying to show that you don't have to. It doesn't have to take you 3 days to make a set of cookies for your family, where it might take me 3 days to make a set of cookies, that are a little more labor intensive. But these are fun. Yeah.
Right. Well, Terrence Lanier commented that the pajama bottoms are the pajama bottoms are so cute, and I agree, and so does Candy Williams.
Oh, and, thanks, guys.
These are just precious. And one thing I do want to make sure that we point out is that if again, I'm going to add all of these slides that you're seeing today and these pictures and everything to the comments section of this broadcast on Facebook. So if you want to look back and reference it, it's going to be right there. I've been adding some of the extra tips Lorie's been giving us that weren't on those slides in the comments as well. So you'll have those for reference. And, if you want to check out some of the wonderful other cookies that Lorie does, and I actually was stalking the Facebook page last night, and they are just precious. You can find her at loriebbakes.com or Lorie B Bakes on Facebook, and you have Instagram as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah, and if you're in the middle of baking and have a question, feel free to reach out to Lorie, or we'll try to go back and check these comments if you come up with a question later as you're working on your stuff. But I think the key to this is have fun with it, and just keep practicing. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think this has been so much fun today. I really appreciate it, Lorie.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely keep a lookout on those comments and see if we have any questions. But again, scrolling at the bottom, loriebbakes.com. Feel free to reach out to her if you have any questions about.
I want to say, Oh, I'm sorry, Dorothy. I just want
No,
to
go
say
ahead.
that my email is on there. So if they have a question and they want to email
Mhm.
me directly, it's Lorie@loriebbakes.com. And I'm happy to, provide any support that I can because it's a fun
Awesome.
hobby. It really is.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And this kind of brings me to talk about real quick. I'm going to be posting, or actually, we are going to be posting with AARP Alabama some of our holiday treat recipes, some of the staff's
Oh,
holiday treat recipes and traditional recipes on Facebook. So y'all keep a lookout for that. But that's just a thing that we kind of want to do for our Facebook followers and our members, just to kind of give them some of our fun traditional recipes as well. I can guarantee you the ones that I will be posting are going to be super easy.
yay.
And I can't take credit. It's all my mom. So, but that's going to be a lot of fun, and I can't wait for that. And Lorie, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
I
thank
appreciate it.
you. It was been
Thank
a
you.
fun time. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Well, happy early birthday again,
Thank
and
you.
happy holidays.
You
So,
too. You too.
thanks. All right, folks. So we are going to end our show today, which was awesome. Talking about next week's show is going to be Alabama folk life holiday traditions, and it's going to be super fun. And if you happen to have a tradition that you would like to share with us, please reach out to Emily Blavos at alabamafolklife@gmail.com. And let us know if you want to share it on a video. We would love to help you do your video and talk about that. And we may even feature it on next week's Wisdom Wednesday. But we'd love to hear and learn about what your holiday traditions are that have been passed down through your generations. We've already got some great videos that I can't wait to show you next week. And so we are going to end, as we usually do, with our video of things that are coming up for next week. And until we see you again, I hope you stay happy and stay healthy and stay wise.